Hey there, and welcome back to Undercover Mysteries. Today, we're venturing into the darker side of our explorations, a compilation of some of the creepiest, most unsettling discoveries we've ever made. These caves and tunnels hold stories that were meant to stay buried. But if you're brave enough to stay with us, we're about to uncover what lies beneath the surface. Let's begin. Bob Thomas lived for adventure. He cheered for the Houston Astros, dove into deep seas, and binged nature shows on Discovery. His wild spirit went beyond the usual. He climbed mountains and tackled tough rock faces before becoming a master diver. But Bob's first big adventure came in the US Navy, where he served from 1987 to 1993. After that, he moved into IT work. Still, Bob never lost his love for excitement. On Facebook, Bob called himself an IT architect, conservationist, and diving fanatic. His photos showed a life full of action and nature, shots with dive buddies, his girlfriend, and himself in full scuba gear. For Bob, diving wasn't just a hobby. It had become part of who he was. His friends said that for over 20 years, diving came as naturally to Bob as breathing. Everything changed on November 19, 2017. While most people prepared for Thanksgiving, Bob had other ideas. That Sunday, he decided to go for a quick dive, something he'd done many times before. His plan was simple: dive, then head to his girlfriend's house for a party. That morning, Bob left home and met two diving friends, a man and a woman. They went to the Tilly Foster Iron Mine in Putnam County, New York, near Brewster Station. Tilly Foster Mine had an interesting past of discovery and tragedy. Named after Tilly Foster, the mine started in the early 1800s as a busy mining spot. By the late 1800s, it had become a huge open pit, over 400 feet deep, with room to grow. Sadly, in 1895, part of the mine caved in, killing 13 workers. This event ended mining there, and soon after, the nearby reservoir flooded the pit, turning it into an underwater cave. Bob's interest in Tilly Foster Mine went beyond its tragic past. He had a personal mission. Bob dove there to solve the mystery of Robin F. Murphy, a 17-year-old girl who vanished on April 9, 1995. Over time, search teams explored the mine, thinking her remains might be deep below. A psychic named Valentina Lomborg even claimed Robin was murdered and dumped there, but no solid proof ever surfaced. Robin's case stayed open, and Bob wanted to help. He joined a volunteer dive team led by Dan Wright, an expert diver. Bob and his teammates hoped to find clues to give Robin's family closure. From 2016 to 2017, they made almost 90 dives. In August 2016, they thought they had a breakthrough. They found a piece of clothing matching Robin's. Her mother and the police confirmed it was hers, pushing the divers to keep searching. By November 2017, Bob and his team still dove, looking for more. That Sunday, Bob called two diving friends to join him for another dive. It seemed like a normal day, just like their many other dives into Tilly Foster Mine. The mine setup was familiar. Divers stood on a platform above the water, ready to jump into the 177-foot drop. Bob came prepared with his scuba gear: tank, regulator, heated wetsuit, mask, fins, and other essentials. The surface water temperature was 70 degrees Fahrenheit, but 10 feet down, it dropped to 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Bob's wetsuit handled the cold well, and he had years of experience in these conditions. At noon, Bob made his first jump, leaving his friends on the surface. Everything seemed fine until Bob noticed his scuba tank running low on air. This wasn't a crisis yet. Experienced divers like Bob know how to manage air. But Bob hadn't brought a backup tank, a choice that would soon cause problems. Bob's dive that day took an unexpected turn. As he explored the underwater cave, he pushed deeper, driven by his mission to find clues about Robin. The cold water surrounded him, but his wetsuit kept him warm. His movements stirred up silt, making it hard to see clearly. Time passed quickly underwater. Bob checked his air gauge often, knowing he needed to surface soon. But something caught his eye, a glint of metal in the murky water. He swam closer, heart racing. As Bob investigated, he lost track of time. His air supply dwindled faster than he realized. Suddenly, he felt the urgent need to surface. He turned back, but the cave's twists and turns confused him. Panic set in as he struggled to find his way out. Bob's training kicked in. He tried to stay calm and conserve air. He swam slowly, searching for familiar landmarks. But the lack of air made thinking clearly difficult. His lungs burned, demanding oxygen he didn't have. In those final moments, Bob thought of his loved ones, his passion for diving, and the mystery he hoped to solve. As darkness closed in, he realized the risks he'd taken in pursuit of answers. The Tilly Foster Mine, once a place of adventure and purpose, became Bob's final resting place. Bob's situation worsened quickly. He cut his dive short to refill his tank, but faced a major challenge. Debris clouded the water, making it hard to see. Bob felt lost. His dive lights barely pierced the darkness, not enough to guide him. Fear crept in. The cold, dark water and dwindling air muddled Bob's thoughts. He got tangled in underwater cables, making things worse. Panic took over. Bob thrashed around, trying to break free, but only got more stuck. Each move used up more air. His dive computer showed only minutes of oxygen left. Bob needed to surface, but the cables trapped him. Usually, a scuba tank lasts up to an hour, depending on depth. But at 100 feet down, time shrinks fast. Bob's panic had already used up much of his air. At 12:34 p.m., less than an hour after diving in, Bob ran out of air. He blacked out from hypoxia, lack of oxygen. Even then, someone could have saved Bob if they knew he was in trouble, but his friends on the surface had no clue anything was wrong. Time ticked by. Dan Wright, Bob's colleague, started searching at 1 p.m. He stayed underwater for over 2 hours, but couldn't find Bob. Meanwhile, Bob's girlfriend waited for him at the party. When he hadn't shown up by 3:50 p.m., she called the police. The search for Bob started right away. Local fire department divers and state police joined in. They used high-tech sonar and cameras to search the mine. The next day, at 12:55 p.m., they found Bob's body. He was still tangled in cables 171 feet below. Officials ruled his death an accident. Months later, people placed a memorial stone to honor Bob. It stood as a tribute to a man whose love for adventure ultimately took his life. His death reminded other divers of the dangers lurking in dark waters. The search team's discovery brought closure, but also deep sadness. Bob's friends and family mourned the loss of a brave, caring man. His dedication to finding Robin Murphy's remains showed his selfless nature. Though he didn't solve that mystery, Bob's efforts weren't in vain. He inspired others to keep searching for answers. Nestled deep within the rugged landscapes of Norway's Rana municipality lies Pluragrotta, the deepest and most extensive cave system in northern Europe. This underwater labyrinth is both a siren's call and a death trap for thrill-seeking cave divers from around the world. Its allure lies in the beauty of its vibrant, submerged caves. Yet beneath its surface, the Plura cave system hides a treacherous path that has claimed more than its fair share of lives, particularly during Norway's harsh winters when the surface of Lake Plura freezes over, encasing the entrance in a formidable barrier of ice. On February 6, 2014, 5 Finnish divers, seasoned veterans of the sport, embarked on a mission that would test their courage, skill, and resolve to the utmost limits. These men were not newcomers to the dangers of cave diving. They had faced the perils of the deep before, navigating through some of the most challenging underwater passages in Europe. However, this dive was different. It was to be the culmination of their experiences, pushing the boundaries of human endurance and testing the very limits of what was possible beneath the earth. Their destination was Steinelflaga, a remote and perilous cave within the Plura system, accessed only through a network of narrow underwater tunnels. The dive was planned to take approximately 5 hours, with the men descending to depths exceeding 130 meters, far beyond the comfort zone of even the most experienced cave divers. For most amateur divers, an hour at 30 meters would be considered a significant achievement. But for these 5 men, this dive was an opportunity to achieve something extraordinary, something few others could claim. The expedition began in the early morning hours, with the men cutting a triangular hole in the ice covering Lake Plura. They slipped into the icy depths, encased in waterproof dry suits and laden with advanced diving equipment designed to withstand the extreme pressures and temperatures they would encounter. From the moment they entered the water, the risks were evident. The deeper they dove, the colder and darker the water became, the tunnels narrowing to the point where even a slight mistake could mean disaster. Jagged rocks protruding from the cave walls threatened to tear through their suits and equipment, while the ever-present danger of hypercapnia, a potentially deadly buildup of carbon dioxide, loomed large over the entire expedition. Patrick Grankvist led the group, a seasoned diver who, along with 2 others, had discovered the passage between Plura and Steinlaflaga the previous year. His close friend, Jari Hinen, accompanied him, attempting the full traverse for the first time. The dive began smoothly, with the men descending into the inky blackness of the cave, their path illuminated only by the beams of their flashlights. But as they reached the deepest section of the cave, 110 meters below the entrance, disaster struck. Grankvist realized that Hinen was no longer behind him. Panic gripped him as he circled back, searching desperately for his friend. When he finally found Hinen, he was trapped in a narrow section of the cave, ensnared by a cord from his diving equipment. Hinen was signaling frantically with his flashlight, the only way he could communicate his distress in the pitch-black water. Grankvist knew the danger his friend was in. Hinen was panicking, his breathing becoming erratic, which meant he was at serious risk of hypercapnia. Grankvist acted quickly, attempting to calm Hinen and offering him a gas cylinder to help reduce the carbon dioxide in his system. But as Hinen tried to switch mouthpieces, tragedy struck. His panic overwhelmed him, and he began to gasp for air, inadvertently inhaling water instead. Grankvist could only watch in horror as his friend drowned before his eyes, his struggles growing weaker until finally he was still. The shock of witnessing his friend's death was overwhelming, but Grankvist knew he had to control his own emotions and breathing to avoid the same fate. He could not afford to panic, not now, not here, deep within the heart of the cave. After a futile attempt to free Hinen's body, he realized he had no choice but to continue towards Steinlaflaga. The journey ahead was fraught with danger. Not only did he have to navigate the treacherous tunnels, but he also faced the risk of decompression sickness, a potentially deadly condition that could strike if he ascended too quickly after spending so much time at such extreme depths. As Grankvist pressed on, the second team of divers, led by Visa Ranin, was following behind. Ranin was the first to encounter Hinen's body, and he was faced with a gut-wrenching decision: turn back or continue. After weighing his options, he chose to press on, but the delay in navigating around the body added several hours to his decompression time. When Ranin finally surfaced, he was in agony, suffering from the early stages of decompression sickness. The pain in his joints, a common symptom of the condition, grew worse with each passing hour, a grim reminder of the dangers they faced in the depths. Meanwhile, the third diver, Jari Uzumaki, was dealing with his own nightmare. Upon discovering Hinen's lifeless body, Uzumaki panicked, his mind overwhelmed by the sight of his dead friend. In his terror, he overloaded his rebreather with carbon dioxide, a mistake that would prove fatal. Despite the efforts of the fifth diver, Kai Kenan, to assist him, Uzumaki could not regain control and drowned just 20 meters from where Hinen's body lay. Kenan, shaken but determined to survive, made the grueling journey back to the starting point, breaking through a thin layer of ice as he finally resurfaced nearly 11 hours after the dive began. All three surviving divers were immediately hospitalized with decompression sickness. their bodies racked with pain from the bends. Local authorities took their statements, and the Plura cave system was temporarily closed to prevent further tragedies. The loss of Hinen and Uzumaki sent shockwaves through the Finnish diving community, and word of the disaster soon reached Sami Pakarinen, a diving instructor and close friend of the deceased, who was teaching in Mexico at the time. Pakarinen spent hours on a Skype call with British cave diver Rick Stanton, a man renowned for his rescue and recovery work in some of the world's most dangerous underwater caves. Stanton had already heard about the accident and was preparing to assist in retrieving the bodies of the two divers. 2 weeks later, he, along with divers John Volin and Jason Mallison, made the arduous journey to Norway to begin the recovery operation. However, the mission proved more challenging than anticipated. The narrow passage where Hinen's body was lodged blocked access to Uzumaki, making it impossible to reach him from the Steinle-Flaga side of the tunnel. The divers considered returning to their point of origin and attempting to dive backward through the system, but the risks were too great. The recovery was called off, and the Norwegian police declared the operation too dangerous to continue. Devastated by the failure, but resolute in his determination, Grankvist made a solemn promise to Hinen's widow. He vowed to bring her husband's body back, no matter the cost. It was an unspoken code among divers. No one gets left behind, not even in death. This was a promise Grankvist intended to keep. Quietly, the surviving divers began planning a second unauthorized recovery mission. They knew that they would be denied permission if they asked, so they kept their preparations secret. On March 22, 2014, a team of 27 divers descended on Plura. This time, the operation was meticulously planned. 2 teams of support divers worked in the shallower areas of the cave, ensuring that the main team had everything they needed for the deep dive. Grankvist, Pekarinen, and Kanan were the ones who would go deep, risking everything to retrieve the bodies of their fallen friends. Volin, still recovering from his own injuries sustained during the previous attempt, managed surface operations, coordinating the efforts of the entire team. The recovery mission was grueling and fraught with danger, but after 3 days, the bodies of Jari Heinen and Jari Uzumaki were finally brought to the surface. The Norwegian police, while pleased that the bodies had been retrieved, made it clear that several rules had been broken in the process. But for the surviving divers, those concerns were secondary to the fulfillment of their vow. As an environmentalist, especially fond of wild, untamed places, camping with friends by woods or water topped his list of favorite activities. William's passion for protecting the environment led him to a job at the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. But he wasn't all about desk work. As a hands-on guy, he constantly sought new adventures. This drive led him to discover caving, an activity that would soon play a big role in his life. It all began when a friend invited him to explore a small cave near their hometown. They spent a few hours wandering around without any special gear. The trouble-free experience boosted their confidence. William felt captivated by the idea of uncovering a hidden world beneath the surface. This new interest quickly grew into a strong fascination. Despite their lack of experience, William and his friends eagerly sought a bigger challenge. His friend James suggested a trip to Cave City, Kentucky. Above ground, Cave City offers typical tourist attractions like shops, restaurants, and museums. But underground, it boasts a vast network of caves waiting to be explored. Among Cave City's many caves, they chose Buzzard Roost Cave. The brochure made it look the most exciting. However, Buzzard Roost Cave isn't suited for beginners. It features deep drops, narrow spaces, and plenty of sharp rock formations. It's a place that demands caution with every step. Yet, this didn't discourage William and his friends. They felt eager, perhaps too eager, to make this their first real caving adventure. On May 28, 1993, William, James, and 2 more friends, Jakela and Kevin, left Illinois. They aimed to make the most of Memorial Day weekend. While others likely planned barbecues or beach trips, these guys focused on one goal: exploring the extensive cave system in Cave City. Upon arrival, they snagged a brochure showcasing 2 public tours. The first, a historic tour, offered a safe, guided walk through the cave's more accessible parts. The second, a wild cave tour, promised more adventure, involving crawling and squeezing through tighter spots. They naturally picked the historic tour as a warm-up. Before starting, all 3 had to sign a waiver. This form basically said, "If something goes wrong, you can't blame us." They signed without hesitation, perhaps too confident in their safety. The cave's dangers weren't clearly explained before they signed. They trusted the tour guide and operators to keep them safe. It's worth noting that in 1998, Kentucky passed a rule protecting cave owners from lawsuits if they don't charge for exploration. Different rules apply if they do charge. William and James knew of risks, but let curiosity win. Kevin, however, chose to stay above ground. The historic tour proved easy, a casual walk through the cave with their guide, Dave Hardin. Afterward, William and James craved more intensity. The wild cave tour beckoned, so they signed up with 4 others. The guide handed out another waiver for everyone to sign. Each person received 2 flashlights, and the guide stressed sticking together until the tour's end. The guide warned of dangers ahead, but it's unclear if anyone truly heeded these warnings. Their excitement for the long-awaited adventure overshadowed caution. As they prepared to delve deeper, they noticed a lack of helmets, extra supplies, or multiple light sources. Experienced cavers would recognize these as essential, especially in a risky cave like Buzzard Roost. Once inside, excitement hit hard. William and James loved every twist and turn, their thrill mixed with a touch of fear keeping adrenaline flowing. Everything seemed smooth as they reached the halfway point. The cave's darkness enveloped them as they pressed on. The air grew thicker and the passages narrowed. William and James led the group, their enthusiasm pushing them forward. The guide's warnings faded into the background as they focused on the thrill of exploration. Suddenly, the path split. Without hesitation, William and James chose the tighter route, assuming it led to more exciting discoveries. The others followed, trusting their judgment. As they squeezed through the narrow opening, the cave seemed to come alive with echoes of their movements. Little did they know, this decision would test their limits. The passage grew increasingly challenging, demanding more strength and agility with each step. The tour's second half revealed its true nature. The guide led them through a tight spot to a 30-foot hanging cable ladder with wooden rungs. This marked their first real challenge. After descending, they crawled briefly before reaching a 20-foot ladder squeezed between narrow rock walls. Eager to capture the moment, William decided to photograph the group navigating the ladder. The guide explained the safest descent method, but didn't specifically instruct them to face forward, unlike previous ladders. As William moved for a better angle, he unknowingly stepped onto an unstable ledge. It gave way under his weight, sending William plummeting 50 feet into the cave. The fall was severe. William hit his head on the cave floor, knocking him unconscious. The group watched in shock as their friend lay motionless. Panic spread quickly. The guide immediately radioed for help, desperately seeking assistance. William started regaining consciousness, but he was in bad shape. Disoriented, in extreme pain, and bleeding heavily, he clearly suffered a severe head injury. The group tried comforting him, but the gravity of their situation sank in. They were deep in the cave, with limited resources and a long wait ahead. Time crawled as they awaited the rescue team. Each minute felt endless. William, though awake, grew weaker, his condition visibly worsening. The guide kept assuring them help was coming, but tension filled the cave. After what felt like forever, they heard the distant sounds of the approaching rescue team. The guide maintained constant communication, updating them on William's condition and the cave's layout. The rescue crew, properly equipped, carefully navigated the tight spaces and ladders, finally reaching William. The rescuers quickly assessed William's injuries and stabilized him for transport. They faced the daunting task of moving him through the narrow passages and up the ladders. Every step required extreme caution to avoid worsening his condition. What started as an exciting adventure had turned into a life-threatening ordeal. Finally, after hours of careful maneuvering, they reached the cave's entrance. Emergency medical personnel waited to rush William to the hospital. The rest of the group emerged, shaken and exhausted, grateful to see daylight again. The rescue team swiftly checked William's state and knew they had to move fast. They secured him on a stretcher and started the tough job of getting him out. They moved slowly and carefully to avoid hurting him more. His friends, once excited, now followed with heavy hearts. Their fun trip turned scary, but the harm was done. William's thrilling trip had become a nightmare, and despite the rescue team's hard work, he died the next day. Michael and Paul Hayden's childhood was full of thrilling adventures, mostly centered around a special cave in Goss Canyon. This cave wasn't just any old hole in the ground. For the Hayden kids, it was a world of fun and mystery. During hot California summers, it became their cool hideout. With 6 children in the family, they often needed a place to escape the heat, and this cave was perfect. The Hayden siblings would hike to the cave, excited to jump into the chilly waters inside. For them, the cave wasn't just rocks and water. It was a place where they made memories and let their imaginations soar. From the outside, the cave didn't look like much. The entrance was a small, dark opening near La Centa, California. It measured about 3 feet by 4 feet, hiding the vast world inside. To enter the cave, the Haydens had to crawl through a narrow 50-foot tunnel before reaching a slope that took them 30 feet deeper. Despite the tight entrance, the journey was worth it. Just 150 feet in, they would reach the flooded pool area, perfect for swimming and exploring dry ledges and holes. The cave's layout, with its deep water pools and connected tunnels, offered endless chances for adventure. As they got older, the Hayden brothers became more skilled and brave in their cave exploring. They had spent many hours swimming through the flooded parts of the cave, always trying to go a bit further. Their curiosity never stopped. They knew there was more to find beyond the paths they knew as kids. By the time they were adults, they wanted to explore even deeper into the cave. Paul, especially, had gained the skills for such daring cave exploring. After nearly 15 years as an Air Force pararescue instructor, he had become an excellent scuba diver. His job in the elite pararescue team required him to be ready for anything, and his careful planning and skills had made him well respected. On September 17, 2000, they decided to take on their biggest challenge yet. Paul wanted to check out some of the deeper, unknown parts of the cave. They hiked up to the entrance, carrying their scuba gear. At the pool area, Paul got ready for his dive. He attached his GoPro camera for light and made sure he had enough air for 2 hours underwater. Michael, always careful, chose to stay in the main cave. He would keep an eye on Paul's progress and watch the time. Even though they knew the cave well, it still felt mysterious and a bit scary. To stay in touch during the dive, the brothers had a simple but clever plan. They tied a rope to a rock in the main cave. Michael would tug the rope twice to check on Paul, and Paul would tug back to say he was okay. This way they could talk even when they couldn't see each other. It made them feel safer in the dangerous cave. At first, everything seemed fine. Michael let out more rope as Paul went deeper into the cave. Paul kept tugging back, showing he was all right, but after about 20 minutes, something went wrong. Michael tugged the rope, but Paul didn't answer. He tried again, but the rope was stuck tight. Michael started to panic. He pulled as hard as he could, but the rope wouldn't move. He realized Paul might be in trouble, maybe stuck somewhere. With only 90 minutes of air left, Michael knew he had to act fast. He left the cave and ran to get help, every second feeling like it lasted forever. Michael burst into the Centa Valley Sheriff's office, his voice shaking as he told them what happened. The Sheriff's Department knew it was serious and acted quickly. They called the LA County Sheriff's Department and the Mantro Search and Rescue Team. Using special vehicles, they raced across the rocky valley to the cave. They were all ready to do whatever it took to save Paul. When they got to the cave, they jumped into the water right away. They hoped they could still find Paul alive. The rescue team worked fast, knowing every minute counted. They searched the underwater tunnels, looking for any sign of Paul. The cave story that had started as an exciting adventure had turned into a tense rescue operation, with Paul's life hanging in the balance. Paul was excited to check out new parts of the cave he hadn't seen before. The cave wasn't just a natural hole, it was part of an old water well system from 1915. Over time, the cave had changed due to water, erosion, and man-made tunnels for getting water. This history made the cave more interesting, but also more dangerous. The well had been left alone for years, leaving the caves and shafts full of water and bad air. The deep pools in the cave were 100 feet deep, and the tunnels between them were small and risky. The old well shafts, built to get water, were now filled with dirt and rocks, making the place even more dangerous. As Paul swam through the front caves and tunnels, he got to one of the narrow well shafts. It was only 3 feet wide, barely enough room for Paul and his scuba gear. Using his camera light, Paul saw an air pocket at the top of the shaft, a shiny spot that showed there was air to breathe above. Even though Paul was good at scuba diving, he didn't know much about cave diving, which is much harder and riskier. His family said Paul usually used a lighter to check if the air was safe before taking out his breathing tube, but this time he didn't do this important check. A big mistake that would end badly. Paul's GoPro recorded him coming up into the air pocket. The camera's light showed the shaft's walls as Paul took out his breathing tube to take a breath. But right away, something went very wrong. The video showed Paul going back under the water, not trying to put his breathing tube back in. He went limp and sank to the bottom of the shaft, not moving. Above, Michael waited nervously, not knowing his brother had already died in the dangerous cave. When Michael realized what happened, it hit him hard. Paul was gone, and there was nothing he could do to change it. The big question was, how could one breath of air be so deadly? The answer is in the air Paul breathed in. Usually carbon dioxide is only 0.4% of the air we breathe. But in small spaces like caves, where gases from rotting stuff and water erosion build up, the amount of carbon dioxide can be really high. If the air in a closed space has more than 10% carbon dioxide, it can make you pass out right away. This happens because of carbon dioxide poisoning, which is fast and often deadly. Normally we breathe out carbon dioxide from our blood, but when there's way more CO2 in the air than in our blood, it goes the other way. This makes our blood get acidic really fast, causing a dangerous condition called respiratory acidosis. This all happens so quickly that the person can't do anything about it. In a factory, someone breathing in that much carbon dioxide might be saved and given oxygen. But underwater, it's much worse. When Paul passed out, his full air tank was useless. He just fell into the water, sinking to the bottom of the shaft. The sad part was that the skills and gear that had saved others before couldn't help Paul now. Michael, pulling hard on the rope that didn't move, had to face the heartbreaking truth that his brother was gone. This sad event shows how dangerous cave diving can be, even for people who are good at other kinds of diving. Paul Hayden wasn't just a great diver, he was a hero who had spent his life saving others. But cave diving is risky and needs special training and a deep understanding of the unique challenges in caves. The Hayden family's story reminds us that even the most skilled and prepared people can fall victim to nature's unpredictable forces. In Georgia's Gagra Mountains, 4 of the world's deepest caves hide. The Verhousel cave stands out, not just for its depth, but for how hard it is to explore. It's so tricky that teams usually spend months planning before they go in. Since its discovery in 1968, no one has ever tried to go solo. It's not just a bad idea, it's unheard of. Exploring Verhousel is a team job. The cave has 6 camps where explorers can rest and eat, but no matter how you slice it, the 250-foot drop is tough. It takes about 3 or 4 days to go down and the same to climb back up. Enter Sergey Kosev, a 37-year-old from Russia's Voloy district. He wasn't your typical daredevil, but he loved adventure. He first heard about Veryovkina Cave in his village. The last team to go there was in September 2018. They were Russian cavers from the Perovo team. They made it down 6,900 feet before a flood forced them to turn back. But Sergey, who had just started caving as a hobby, wasn't scared. If anything, he was curious. Sergey needed a challenge. He was going through a bit of a life crisis, looking for something to give his life meaning. The idea of exploring Veryovkina Cave seemed perfect. It was a chance to push himself to the limit. For months, Sergey studied the cave, looked at maps, and got ready. He was careful in his planning, but there was one big problem. He was going alone. On Halloween night, 2020, Sergey casually told his wife he was going on a trip to the mountains the next day. He didn't say much, just that he was looking for the meaning of life and would be back soon. On November 1st, he got in his car and drove to Abkhazia, Georgia. Most groups get official permits to explore Veryovkina, but Sergey skipped that step. He was going in secretly, using maps and info he found online from past trips. Sergey reached the cave's entrance and saw a big dark hole in the ground. The rocky cliffs around it made it look scary. He couldn't see much inside, just a deep, dark pit. But Sergey wasn't scared. He was ready with his camo overalls, hiking boots, and climbing gear. He tied a rope to a strong rock and started going down. The first 1,300 feet were really hard. Sergey knew he had to be careful. It was mostly straight down, but he also had to crawl through tight spaces and go around big rocks. Sometimes he had to swim through cold, muddy water in deep holes. After hours of hard work, he made it to the first rest stop at 1,247 feet. Tired but happy, Sergey took a break. His phone said he was at Camp 1300. He changed his wet clothes and ate some food. He was surprised to find stuff left by the Perovo team. They had to leave things behind because of the flood, so Sergey used what he could. After resting, Sergey kept going. His next stop was Camp 600, 1,969 feet from the top. This part was easier, but he still had to deal with tight spaces, slippery climbs, and more cold, muddy water. When he got to Camp 600, he was really happy. This camp had more stuff, like cooking gas, food, and even a makeshift toilet. Best of all, there were sleeping bags, so Sergey could get some good sleep. Even though he could have kept going down, Sergey stayed at Camp 600 for a whole week. No one knows why he waited so long. Maybe he was getting used to the cold, or maybe he needed more time to get ready in his head. Whatever the reason, after a week of rest, Sergey was ready to go to Camp 1000, which was 3,280 feet from the surface. As Sergey went deeper into the cave, he started feeling really cold. Around 2,600 feet down, it got super chilly, between 4 and 7 degrees Celsius, and very damp. Without a wetsuit to keep him warm in the cold water flowing through the cave, Sergey was in trouble. He could have gone back to get warmer clothes, but he had a big problem. He forgot his clamps and stirrups, which he needed to climb back up. He had no choice but to keep going down. Feeling less hopeful, Sergey pushed onto Camp 1000, fighting the cold all the way. When he got there, he thought he might find some gear to help him climb back up. But after looking around, he found nothing. No wetsuit, no stirrups, nothing at all. Tired and upset, he fell down, knowing he was stuck. His only hope was to make it to the next camp at 4,430 feet, but he was getting weaker fast. As Sergey went past 3,600 feet, the freezing water became too much. His body was shaking a lot, and he could barely hold the rope. By the time he reached 3,600 feet, he couldn't go on. He couldn't move his hands or legs, and his body was giving up. He was too cold, and Sergey knew he was dying. In his last moments, he let go of the rope and fell into a deep sleep, never to wake up again. Sergey's wife, used to his solo trips, didn't report him missing for weeks. 9 months later, in August 2021, some cave explorers found a rope going into Veryovkina Cave. Worried that someone might use the rope by mistake, they followed it down and found Sergey's body. They used his phone to confirm who he was through an app for missing people. Getting Sergey's body out of the deep cave was really hard. It took 100 climbers to do it, but when they saw how deep and tricky the cave was, they knew they couldn't just pull his body up in one piece. With his wife's okay, they had to cut up his body and bring it up bit by bit. After days of work, they finally brought Sergey's remains to the surface on August 16, 2021. It was a sad end to an adventure that Sergey hoped would give his life new meaning. Instead, it showed how dangerous extreme exploring can be, especially when done alone. Abbey Caves in northern New Zealand offers a unique adventure for those seeking an unspoiled natural experience. These caves remain untouched by human modifications, and there are no guides to lead the way. You're truly on your own. The journey through Abbey Caves follows a circular path that spans about 4,265 feet, featuring 3 main caves: Organ Cave, Middle Cave, and Ivy Cave. Along the way, signs will help you find your way, but it's important to remember that you're navigating at your own risk. Organ Cave requires a bit of a climb to reach the cave floor. The entrance is a tight squeeze between a rock and the cave wall. The cave itself is about 984 feet long, with impressive striped walls and a round chamber that's home to glowworms. Ivy Cave, located near a stream, is the last stop. It's a bit tricky to access, requiring you to navigate down a slippery stone slope and crouch through narrow passages. This cave is about 656 feet long and consists of 2 main sections. Middle Cave is the easiest to access, with a wide entrance and a flat, ankle-deep water path. However, safety is paramount when exploring these caves. The underground environment can be unpredictable, with risks like sudden water rises and falling rocks, particularly at the entrance to Organ Cave. On May 9, 2023, the students of Whangarei Boys High School in northern New Zealand were filled with anticipation. It was not an ordinary school day. 15 students and 2 teachers were about to embark on an outdoor education trip to Abbey Caves Reserve. Among them was 15-year-old Karnan Patara, a bright student eager to explore the wonders of the caves. The trip was supposed to be a day of adventure and learning, but it would soon turn into a tragic event that would deeply affect the entire community. The day started like any other, with the students gathering at the school early in the morning. They were all excited, chatting about the day ahead and what they might discover in the caves. The teachers briefed the students on the activities planned for the day, which included exploring the caves and learning about the unique geological formations within them. Abbey Caves, located near Whangarei, is a popular destination for school trips and outdoor activities. The caves are known for their impressive rock formations, underground streams, and the challenge they present to explorers. However, on that same morning, around 9 a.m., the National Broadcasting Service issued a weather warning. Meteorologists predicted heavy rainfall in the region, which could lead to rapidly rising streams and rivers. Abbey Caves, in particular, was flagged as a high-risk area for flash floods. Despite these warnings, the decision was made to proceed with the trip. The school's outdoor education program was an important part of the curriculum, and the teachers believed that the experience would be valuable for the students. The group arrived at Abbey Caves Reserve in high spirits. The weather was cloudy, but there was no immediate sign of the heavy rain that had been predicted. The students were eager to start exploring, and the teachers began guiding them toward the entrance of Organ Cave, one of the largest and most impressive caves in the reserve. The students, including Karnan, were filled with excitement as they prepared to enter the cave. For many of them, it was their first time exploring a cave, and they were eager to see what lay inside. As the group made their way into Organ Cave, they were captivated by the beauty of the underground world. The cave's walls were lined with intricate rock formations, and the students marveled at the natural wonders around them. The teachers led the group through the main passage, explaining the geological processes that had formed the cave over thousands of years. The students listened intently, eager to learn and explore further. But as they ventured deeper into the cave, the weather outside began to change. Dark clouds gathered overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The rain quickly intensified, turning into a torrential downpour. The streams around the cave, which had been calm when the group arrived, started to swell rapidly. Inside the cave, the students and teachers were unaware of the danger that was approaching. Suddenly, the water inside the cave began to rise. What had been a dry passage just moments before was now filling with water at an alarming rate. The students and teachers quickly realized that they were in a dangerous situation. Panic set in as the water continued to rise, and the group scrambled to find higher ground. The cave, which had seemed like a safe place to explore, was now turning into a trap. Karnan, along with his classmates, tried to stay calm as they navigated the rising water. The teachers did their best to keep the group together, urging the students to move quickly and stay close. But the water was rising too fast. The current became stronger, making it difficult to maintain balance. The students, some of whom were not strong swimmers, struggled to keep their heads above water. As the group moved through the cave, the water level continued to rise, reaching their waists, then their chests, and finally their necks. The situation was dire. In the chaos, Karnan lost his footing and was swept away by the powerful current. Despite the efforts of his classmates and teachers to reach him, the water was too strong. Karnan was carried deeper into the cave, where the current made it impossible for him to escape. The group, now realizing that one of their own was missing, was filled with fear and desperation. Outside the cave, a construction worker named Caleb Salisbury was going about his day, working on a nearby project. As the rain intensified, Caleb noticed the unusual amount of water accumulating around the site. He then saw a group of young boys running toward him, clearly distressed. The boys had managed to escape the cave and were frantically seeking help. Caleb, understanding the urgency of the situation, immediately stopped what he was doing and called emergency services. Caleb didn't hesitate to act. After making the call, he joined the boys and rushed to the entrance of the cave, where he saw one of the teachers inside struggling to rescue the remaining students. Emergency responders arrived on the scene within minutes. They quickly assessed the situation and began efforts to rescue the trapped students. The conditions inside the cave were challenging. The rescue teams worked tirelessly, but the cave's narrow passages and the powerful current made their task extremely difficult. The teacher inside the cave managed to rescue several students, pulling them from the water and guiding them to safety. But when he realized that Karnan was still missing, he was devastated. The weight of the tragedy bore down on him, and he was left heartbroken and guilt-ridden. As news of the incident spread, search and rescue teams continued to look for Karnan. They used specialized equipment to comb through the cave and surrounding areas, hoping to find him. The search went on for hours, with the rescue teams refusing to give up. But as the day wore on, hope began to fade. After more than 6 hours of searching, the decision was made to pause the search for the night due to the dangerous conditions. The rescuers were exhausted, and the rising water made it too dangerous to continue. Later that night, the search resumed, and tragically, Karnan's lifeless body was found. He had been swept away by the floodwaters, and his young life was lost. A helicopter was used to recover his body and transport him from the site. The discovery of Karnan's body was a devastating blow to the community, and the loss was felt deeply by everyone involved. In September 1984, on a warm weekend afternoon, 3 seasoned divers prepared for what they believed would be a straightforward exploration. Nuno Gomez, an experienced diver with a sharp sense of direction, led the team. Alongside him were Peter Verhousel, whose curiosity often led him to push boundaries, and Malcolm Keeping, a cautious yet capable diver. Their destination was a remote, partially submerged chamber in South Africa's Sterkfontein Caves, a site renowned for its ancient human fossils. The allure of the unknown, combined with the possibility of making a significant discovery, drove them into the murky depths. Sterkfontein, a cave system mostly comprised of dry passages, hides a network of underwater tunnels that had remained largely unexplored. Of the cave's many mysteries, only 10% is submerged, yet these watery passages are treacherous, uncharted territory that few dared to venture into. The divers had set their sights on pushing the limits of what had been previously mapped, hoping to uncover secrets buried for millions of years. Among the fossils, a 2.3 million-year-old skeleton of an early human had been found, providing invaluable insights into human evolution. This historical significance made the cave not only a site of interest for archaeologists, but also a tantalizing challenge for divers like Nuno, Peter, and Malcolm. Nuno had scouted the route just 2 weeks earlier, so he was confident as they navigated through the cave's narrow, winding passages. The group made their way through the elephant chamber, named for its peculiar rock formation that resembled an elephant's trunk, a landmark in their journey. After about 120 meters of squeezing through tight, claustrophobic spaces, they arrived at their destination, a small, oval-shaped chamber. It was no more than 3 meters wide and 1 meter high, but the sense of discovery was immense. The divers couldn't help but wonder if this was a place where early humans had once stood, 2.5 million years ago. The sense of excitement was palpable. The idea that they might be treading where no one had in millennia filled them with a rush of adrenaline. But time was limited, and after a brief exploration, they decided to head back. They swam in single file, Nuno in the lead, followed by Malcolm, with Peter bringing up the rear. It was during this return journey that things took an unexpected turn. Malcolm noticed that Peter, true to his nature, had strayed from the group. Peter was known for his adventurous spirit. He loved pushing the boundaries, often exploring further than was deemed safe. He wasn't the type to panic easily, having spent countless hours in dark, confined spaces underwater. This time, he had veered off to inspect something that had caught his eye, perhaps hoping to find a relic from the ancient past. But finding nothing of interest, he quickly made his way back to the main line, rejoining the others. Nuno and Malcolm waited, their lights cutting through the murky water until Peter's dim light appeared from a side passage. The trio continued their dive, but the atmosphere had changed. Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling of unease as they entered the Milner Hall chamber, a vast, complex space filled with side passages and cavities. Suddenly, he realized that Peter was missing again. The chamber was large enough to make it difficult to determine whether Peter had fallen behind or taken a different route. The two divers paused, scanning the chamber, but there was no sign of Peter, no bubbles, no light, no sound. Concern turned to worry as they realized they were losing precious time. They retraced their steps, searching every side passage they could safely explore, but Peter was nowhere to be found. Hours passed as they scoured the cave, but with their air running low, Nuno and Malcolm knew they had to call for help. They surfaced and immediately contacted the authorities. The first to arrive were fire brigade divers, but they refused to enter the water, citing their lack of experience with cave diving. The situation was growing more dire by the minute. The silt disturbed by their search had reduced visibility to just a meter, making the already dangerous conditions even more treacherous. Desperate for assistance, Nuno reached out to Craig Stevenson, another experienced diver who had explored the same tunnels with him just weeks before. Nuno and Craig resumed the search, pushing themselves to the limit. But as dawn broke, it became clear that their efforts were in vain. The police dive team arrived and took over the operation, but even they couldn't locate Peter. As the hours turned into days, the focus of the mission shifted from rescue to recovery. It was a heartbreaking realization for Nuno and Malcolm, who had hoped against hope that Peter would somehow be found alive. What they didn't know was that Peter was still alive, fighting for his life deep within the cave's labyrinth. Drawn by his insatiable curiosity, Peter had ventured into one of the side passages, eager to see what lay beyond the safety of the main line. But Sterkfontein is no ordinary cave. It's a dark, deceptive place where the surface is not an option for escape. At first, Peter thought he knew where he was going, But as he swam further into the cave, he began to realize he was lost. The feeling of being lost in a cave is unlike any other. At first, there's denial, a belief that you're still on the right path. But as the minutes pass and every turn brings you to a place that looks both familiar and strange, panic starts to set in. Peter's adrenaline surged as he swam in circles, desperately trying to find his way back to the main passage. He knew he was in trouble. Then, in the darkness, he saw it. A small hole above him with a faint silvery reflection. It wasn't much, but it was something. Peter squeezed through the narrow opening, scraping his gear and his skin in the process. On the other side, he found himself in a tiny air chamber with a small island. It was a brief moment of relief, but as the reality of his situation set in, Peter knew he was still in grave danger. He was alone, with no way to communicate with the outside world, and no idea how to escape. For what felt like hours, Peter sat in the dark, his flashlight turned off to conserve the last of its battery. He had air in his tank and water to drink, but he knew that wouldn't be enough. His mind raced with the fear that his friends might have assumed he had drowned and given up the search. He shouted into the darkness, hoping against hope that someone would hear him, but the only response was silence. Meanwhile, the police had sealed off the cave, barring anyone from entering. Even Nuno was kept away, unable to continue the search for his friend. Peter, trapped in the darkness, began to feel the effects of isolation and starvation. The days blurred together as he drifted in and out of sleep, his body growing weaker with each passing hour. He tried to explore the small chamber he was in, but every path led to a dead end. He was too scared to venture into the narrower passages, fearing he might get stuck. As time wore on, Peter's situation became more dire. He lost 44 pounds as his body consumed itself for energy. The darkness and silence became oppressive, leading him to the brink of madness. He began to hallucinate, his mind struggling to cope with the lack of stimuli. The only marker of time passing was the growth of his beard, which had become long and unkempt. It was a grim reminder of how long he had been trapped. 6 weeks after Peter had gone missing, the police called off the search. The caves were reopened, and Nuno and his friend Roger immediately returned. They were determined to find their friend, even if it meant bringing back his body. Roger searched the dry cave, while Nuno dove back into the water. On the first day, Nuno discovered a connection between the wet and dry caves, a potential lead that could finally bring them to Peter. Roger followed the lead and soon made a heartbreaking discovery. Peter's body was found in a small chamber near a sump about 100 meters from the nearest dry exit. He had left messages on the cave walls, trying to signal for help. He had held on for 3 weeks, hoping to be rescued. But in the end, starvation had claimed him. His final message, scrawled on the wall, read, "I love you, Shirley and Mom." In summer 2014, 4 friends set out on a life-changing journey to Spain's Costa Brava region. Their target, the notorious Cova dels Arc cave system, nicknamed Cave of Caskets, due to its deadly past. Though small, stretching only 262 feet, the cave system had a reputation for being unpredictable and treacherous. Its entrance lay hidden 23 feet below the Mediterranean surface, in clear, calm waters that seemed deceptively welcoming. Far from scaring the group, the cave's infamy only fueled their excitement. On July 19, 2014, Ricard, Dionisio, and an unnamed friend geared up for their big adventure. The 4th member stayed on the boat as a safety measure. This dive wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. The group had spent months planning, studying cave maps, talking to local experts, and practicing emergency drills. It wasn't just about thrills. They had worked hard towards this goal. As they slipped into the cool water, their minds buzzed with anticipation for what lay ahead. Before entering Cova dels Arc, the trio explored nearby caves, testing their gear and getting familiar with the underwater landscape. The clear waters and stunning rock formations gave them a taste of the beauty awaiting them. Everything seemed to go smoothly until it didn't. As they neared Covadel's Ark's entrance, the third diver spotted something alarming. There was no guideline rope marking their path, and thick silt covered the cave floor. These two factors spelled danger. Without a guideline, they had no clear route back to safety, and the silt could easily cloud the water, causing disorientation. Trusting his gut, he made the tough call to abort the dive. Ricard and Denisio, however, pressed on. They had come too far and prepared too long to turn back now. Their adventurous spirit and desire to push limits overpowered their caution. They watched their friend swim to safety, but for them, the cave's mysteries proved too tempting. They ventured deeper into the cave. The cave's entrance swallowed them, and everything changed. Darkness enveloped them, and an eerie quiet settled in. Their lights pierced the black, revealing walls adorned with intricate rock patterns. Centuries of nature's work had shaped these formations. The sight amazed and frightened them at once. The deeper they swam, the more reality sank in. They were far below the surface with limited air. The danger of their unexplored surroundings weighed on them, yet their love for discovery pushed them forward. They wanted to see what waited beyond the next turn. At the cave's deepest point, disaster struck. As Ricard and Denisio started to ascend, their fins disturbed the fine silt on the floor. The clear water turned into a murky cloud. In a blink, they lost all sight. They found themselves trapped in a disorienting haze, directionless. Worse still, they had no guideline rope to lead them back. The gravity of their situation hit them hard. Fear gripped them as they grasped how dire things were. Their air was running out fast. They couldn't wait for the silt to settle. Every minute spent in the depths used up their precious oxygen. Time slipped away, and their chances of survival dwindled rapidly. Just as hope seemed lost, a faint glow appeared in the distance. It was a slim chance, but their only one. Desperation fueled their movements as they swam toward the light, clinging to the hope of safety. As they neared, they found a narrow crack in the cave wall, just wide enough to squeeze through. On the other side, they entered a parallel cave system, and more importantly, an air pocket. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ricard and Denisio breathed without their gear. They removed their equipment and gulped air, thankful to be alive. But safety was still far off. The air pocket offered only temporary refuge. As they breathed, carbon dioxide built up in the small space, soon making the air toxic. They needed to find a way out, and fast. Their minds raced, searching for a solution. The cave's twists and turns had disoriented them completely. They had no idea which direction led to the exit. The thought of venturing back into the water filled them with dread. But staying put meant certain death. They faced an impossible choice: risk drowning in the murky waters or slowly suffocate in their temporary haven. Their friend on the boat acted fast. When Ricard and Denisio didn't surface on time, he called for help. By 11 a.m., a big rescue mission started. Corporal Fernando Aguirre from Spain's Civil Guard led the effort. He gathered skilled divers and talked to local experts who knew the cave well. But everyone knew this wouldn't be easy. Covadel's Ark had a bad reputation for being tricky and dangerous. As hours passed, things looked worse for Ricard and Denisio. Their safe spot was turning deadly. The air they breathed was becoming poison. Their bodies got cold and dry, making them weak and tired. Ricard struggled more from the start. He couldn't stay up anymore. Too weak to fight, he sank under the water. Denisio was now alone. He held on, wanting to live for himself and for Ricard. His will to survive kept him going. The rescue team pushed through the muddy water. The dirty water meant they were on the right track. Unlike Ricard and Denisio, they had a rope to guide them back. When they squeezed through the small crack, they saw a sad sight. Ricard floated lifeless in the water. Denisio barely held on to a rock, almost passed out. He was so tired and confused that he didn't want help at first. Time was running out fast. Corporal Aguirre took a risk. He brought Denisio's friend from the boat into the cave. He hoped seeing someone familiar would help Denisio. It worked. When Denisio saw his friend, he seemed to wake up. Hope came back to his eyes. With some gentle words, the rescuers got Denisio to work with them. They gave him medicine to calm him down and brought him up. Denisio became the first diver in Spain to live through such a scary event. They brought Ricard's body out soon after. The diving world felt sad about his death. His name joined the long list of people who died in Cova del's Ark. The cave had claimed another life. The rescue showed how dangerous cave diving can be. It also showed how brave and skilled rescue teams are. The Wayanapanipa Caves in Hawaii are one of the coolest places to swim in the world. Every year, tons of tourists come to these calm waters, amazed by how beautiful and untouched they are. They're looking for an awesome adventure, but many don't know about the sad things that have happened in these caves. People love the caves because they're away from busy tourist spots and have lots of amazing natural sights. They're a hidden treasure for those who want to explore more of the island. The Wayanapanipa Caves, tucked in this perfect setting, have warm, shallow waters surrounded by cool rock shapes. These quiet pools are great for relaxing and taking in the sights, but for the daring, they're an exciting challenge. The bravest visitors dive into the caves, eager to check out the underground passages and find hidden secrets. One of these brave explorers was Gregory Wilhelm, a 33-year-old outdoor lover from Novato, California. Gregory had loved nature since he was a kid. He spent loads of time hiking, camping, and going on road trips, always looking for new places to explore. His love for the outdoors grew even more during his time in Boy Scouts and summer camp programs. There, he learned to really appreciate nature and made great friends along the way. On January 29, 2017, a sunny Sunday afternoon, Gregory was in Hana, Maui with 3 of his buddies. They had been swimming and chilling in Wayanapanipa State Park, enjoying the beautiful surroundings. Later that day, they decided to kick it up a notch and explore the nearby caves. We're not sure if they planned this or just decided on the spot, but they didn't have proper diving gear. This suggests they might not have fully understood how risky it could be. Like many others before them, the group jumped into the cool water near the cave entrance. They enjoyed the refreshing dip while keeping an eye on the light coming in from above. The calm water and beautiful surroundings made it easy to forget about possible dangers below. The caves look inviting, but they're known for being confusing, with twisty passages and water levels that can change quickly. But the thrill of exploring often beats caution, and Gregory, driven by his adventurous spirit, decided to swim deeper into the cave. Gregory and his buddy went deeper into the cave, leaving the 2 girls at the entrance. They only had a phone light in a plastic bag to see. This showed they weren't really ready for what was ahead, but that they were excited to explore, so they kept going into the unknown. As they went further, the water got higher, up to their waists. They came to a big rock blocking the way. Under it was a deep spot where experienced divers like to go. Gregory and his friend didn't have diving gear, but they decided to take a quick dive anyway. They planned to come up after a minute, but they quickly saw the water was much deeper than they thought, and it was super dark all around. Even though things looked scary, Gregory's curiosity won. He really wanted to see what was ahead. He always loved adventure. His friend got scared and swam back to safety. Gregory had gone too far into the cave, not knowing his friend had left. The darkness that seemed cool at first turned into a confusing maze. Gregory was now alone and in trouble. When Gregory finally knew he needed air, he got really scared. He couldn't tell which way was up in the pitch-black water. He started to panic as he looked for a way out. He was breathing faster and harder, trying to find the surface. In his crazy search, he found a small air pocket. It was a short break where he could breathe and think. This spot, usually underwater, gave him a moment to rest, but he knew he couldn't stay long. Back at the cave entrance, Gregory's friends were getting worried. The 2 girls felt something was wrong. They decided to look deeper in the cave. When they found Gregory's friend, he was freaking out and confused. He couldn't understand how Gregory had disappeared so fast in the water. Gregory's friend made a brave but scary choice. He decided to go back into the cave alone to find Gregory. He dove into the dark water again and again, hoping to find his friend. On his third try, he saw a small light far away in the black water. He swam as hard as he could towards it, his heart beating fast. As he got closer, the light got brighter. It was Gregory's phone light, still on in the plastic bag. But Gregory wasn't there. His friend felt awful. He had tried so hard, but found nothing. Worried about his own safety, he quickly swam back to the cave entrance. The two women were waiting there. They grabbed the phone and ran out of the cave to call for help. The Hana Fire Department came fast. They called a rescue team to help look for Gregory, but finding him wasn't going to be easy. The Wayanapanipa caves are known for changing water levels and being super dark. Even good divers can get lost in there. Gregory was brave and strong, but the cave was too much for him that day. The rescue teams looked everywhere in the cave, hoping Gregory was still alive. Sadly, they couldn't find him in time. After searching for what felt like forever, they found his body deep in the cave, 75 feet down. Reports suggest Gregory got lost in a tight space full of rock and water. He couldn't tell which way to swim, making him panic more with each try. He kept diving back and forth, but couldn't find a way out. Even for a smart guy who swam well, this was a tough spot. After what felt like forever searching wildly, he saw a glimmer of hope, a passage ahead. But Greg's luck ran out. He picked the wrong path, making things worse. He tried to go back, but it was too late. Time was up, and he couldn't break free. Despite his brave efforts, he couldn't escape, and the darkness below swallowed him. When the rescue team found his body later, they saw that he had floated 75 feet deep into the cave. What happened that day shows how dangerous even beautiful places can be. Gregory Wilhelm's life ended too soon because of curiosity, bravery, and the dangerous nature of the Wayanapanipa caves. His story reminds us how risky it can be to explore unknown places. It's a warning for anyone who might want to do something similar. Nestled within the picturesque Adirondack Hills, about 10 miles east of Ithaca, New York, lies a mysterious and alluring cavern known as Schroeder's Pants Cave. This intriguing name has piqued the curiosity of adventurers and spelunkers for decades, drawing them into its depths to uncover the secrets hidden beneath the Earth's surface. The story of Schroeder's Pants Cave began in 1947 when two intrepid explorers, Herbert Schroeder and his close friend George Lyon, stumbled upon its entrance during one of their routine hikes. As the tale goes, while maneuvering through a particularly narrow passageway, Herbert's pants caught on a jagged rock and tore dramatically. Amused by the incident and eager to immortalize the moment, George jokingly dubbed the cavern Schroeder's Pants Cave, a name that has endured ever since. By 1948, news of this newfound subterranean wonder had spread, and the cave was officially open to the public. Enthusiasts flocked to experience its winding passages and hidden chambers, making it one of New York State's most popular spelunking destinations. The cave's intricate network of tunnels, with evocative names like the Lemon Squeeze, Gun Barrel, and Z-Turn, offered challenges and breathtaking beauty to those brave enough to explore them. However, beneath its enchanting facade, Schroeder's Pants Cave held dangers that would forever alter its history. On a crisp Saturday morning, February 13, 1965, a 23-year-old scientist and avid spelunker named James Mitchell arrived in the small town of Dolgeville, accompanied by his friends Heidi Miller and Charles Bennett. The trio, filled with anticipation and excitement, planned to spend the day delving into the depths of Schroeder's Pants Cave, eager to chart new territories and revel in the cave's natural splendor. Before embarking on their expedition, they intended to meet George Lyon to discuss the day's plans and gather recent updates about the cave's conditions. Unfortunately, George was away, and the trio proceeded without crucial information about the recent thaw that had caused icy meltwater to surge through the cave's passages. Undeterred, James, Heidi, and Charles entered the cave, navigating through its dark and narrow corridors with practiced ease. They squeezed through the tight confines of the lemon squeeze, carefully edged along the gun barrel, and twisted through the Z-turn, eventually arriving at a spacious central chamber that echoed with the distant sound of rushing water. In the heart of this chamber lay a formidable challenge. A vertical shaft plunging 80 feet into the darkness below, with a small but relentless stream cascading down its length. The water, freshly melted from winter's grip, was bone-chillingly cold, adding an extra layer of peril to the descent. Eager to explore further, James volunteered to rappel down the shaft, while Heidi and Charles remained above to manage the safety lines. Equipped with a sturdy harness, a reliable foot strap, and a determined spirit, James began his descent into the abyss, the sound of water growing louder as he ventured deeper. Midway down, disaster struck. James's rope became entangled around a protruding rock, halting his progress and pinning one of his arms against the cold, wet wall of the shaft. The relentless stream of icy water battered him from above, rapidly sapping his body heat and strength. Despite his efforts to free himself, the combination of numbing cold and the rope's tension rendered him immobile. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Heidi and Charles sprang into action, desperately attempting to haul James back up to safety. They pulled with all their might, but the slippery, wet ropes and James's compromised position made it an arduous task. All the while, James remained remarkably calm, shouting up words of encouragement and insisting he would find a way out. Minutes stretched into an agonizing 45, and as James's responses grew weaker, Charles made the critical decision to seek help. He scrambled out of the cave and raced to a nearby farm, frantically searching for assistance. Due to the remote location and lack of immediate rescue services, it took precious hours before a specialized cave rescue team from Washington, D.C. could be dispatched, flying in on a military aircraft to aid in the operation. By the time the rescue team arrived and navigated the treacherous passages to reach James, it was too late. The unforgiving cold and relentless water had claimed his life, casting a somber shadow over the once enthusiastic expedition. Retrieving James's body proved to be an immense challenge. The narrow confines of the shaft, coupled with the continuous flow of water and unstable walls, made extraction dangerous for the rescuers themselves. After several days of exhaustive and risky efforts, the decision was made to seal the shaft, leaving James to rest within the depths he so passionately sought to explore. A memorial stone was later placed at the cave's entrance, honoring his adventurous spirit and tragic end. The incident sent shockwaves through the caving community, highlighting the inherent dangers of spelunking and the critical importance of proper preparation and safety measures. Discussions arose about the need for trained rescue teams to be readily available near popular caving sites, and for explorers to be better equipped to handle unexpected hazards such as sudden floods and hypothermia. Decades later, in a poignant turn of events, George Lyon's grandson, Christian, took it upon himself to bring closure to the lingering sorrow surrounding Schroeder's Pants Cave. With the blessing of James Mitchell's family and the support of a dedicated team of experienced cavers, Christian organized a mission in 2006 to recover James's remains and provide a proper farewell. The expedition was meticulously planned, utilizing advanced equipment and techniques that had evolved since the 1960s. After hours of careful navigation and excavation, the team successfully retrieved James's remains, allowing his family and friends to finally lay him to rest with dignity and peace. Today, Schroeder's Pants Cave stands as both a testament to nature's breathtaking beauty and a solemn reminder of the risks that come with exploring its hidden wonders. The cave continues to attract adventurers, now equipped with enhanced knowledge and respect for the subterranean world. James Mitchell's legacy lives on, inspiring a generation of explorers to pursue their passions with courage, preparedness, and a profound appreciation for the mysteries that lie beneath our feet. On a cold Sunday morning, March 22, 1959, 8 adventurous cavers gathered at the entrance of Peak Cavern, a renowned cave system near Castleton in Derbyshire, England. Among them was Oscar Hackett Neil Moss, a 20-year-old philosophy student from Balliol College, Oxford. Neil's heart raced with excitement as he prepared to dive into the depths of the cave. He was an enthusiastic explorer with a deep passion for uncovering the secrets hidden underground. Accompanying Neil were members of the British Speleological Association, seasoned cavers who shared his excitement for the upcoming adventure. Their mission was to explore a passage located about half a mile from the cave's entrance and investigate a fissure discovered in a side chamber 2 weeks earlier. This would be no easy task. The journey would take them roughly 1,000 feet below ground through a complex labyrinth of narrow, winding passages. Entering the cave, the cavers immediately faced their first challenge: the notorious Mucky Duck section. This was a tight, wet tunnel that often filled with water after rainfall, making it a tough squeeze, even for experienced cavers. Despite the difficulties, the group pushed forward, navigating through the narrow passage with determination. Beyond the Mucky Duck lay the Boulder Passage, which was somewhat easier but still demanded careful negotiation around various obstacles. About 150 meters into the passage, the group encountered a 3-meter climb on the north wall of the upper gallery. Above them was Pickering Passage, an extended narrow crawl that required them to kneel and maneuver in tight spaces. This route ended with a tricky bend and a muddy sump above the eye hole, barely large enough for a person to pass through. Beyond this point, the passage led to the stalagmite chamber, now known as Moss Chamber, one of the most beautifully decorated chambers in the cave. Neil was thrilled to see the chamber and explore the mysterious tight shaft discovered earlier. After over an hour of intense crawling, elbowing, and climbing, the team reached their destination. Despite their exhaustion, they marveled at the natural beauty surrounding them. The fissure in the ground was large enough for an average person to pass through, measuring about 1 meter by 70 centimeters. Neil's curiosity was piqued as he wondered what lay beyond the passage. No one had fully explored the shaft, but they estimated its depth to be around 40 feet. The shaft descended slightly off vertical for 12 feet, followed by a challenging corkscrew twist, leading to a 10-foot inclined plane, and then a further vertical 18-foot drop. Around 3:30 p.m., the group lowered a flexible-sided ladder designed for accessing confined spaces. Neil began his descent into the unknown, maneuvering and sliding down. He wasn't secured with a safety rope, as they believed the narrowness of the fissure would prevent him from falling. Shortly after starting his descent, he encountered an incredibly tight corkscrew compression. Despite the challenge, he navigated through it, feeling a sense of accomplishment. However, he wasn't aware of the difficulties ahead. Throughout his descent, Neil maintained constant communication with the team, assuring them that everything was going as planned. After successfully passing through the corkscrew twist, he continued his descent, but soon felt irregularities with his footing. Initially, he thought he could maneuver around them, as he had in the corkscrew section. After some time, he realized that a boulder was blocking his path. Understanding he couldn't dislodge the boulder or maneuver within the confined space, he decided to climb back up. Unfortunately, Neil found himself unable to lift his feet sufficiently to ascend the ladder. He became wedged in an elliptical crevice only 18 inches wide, unable to move in either direction. His cries for help echoed from the depths as he found himself trapped. Despite their efforts to lift Neil by pulling on the ladder, it became jammed between the cave surface and Neil's body. Situations like these are not uncommon in caving, and initially, Neil's companions thought the rescue would be straightforward. However, several attempts to haul him up with ropes failed, with each rope snapping or shearing on the rock edge. This likely caused Neil to panic, and as he tried to climb upward, he became firmly stuck just below the corkscrew. Unable to bend his legs to grip the ladder or flex his elbows to ascend further, he found himself in a dire situation. Recognizing the urgency, some cavers went to seek additional help. Within hours, volunteers from across England arrived at Peak Tavern, determined to free the trapped Neil. Hundreds of volunteers, along with assistance from the Royal Air Force, police, and even the Navy, joined the rescue efforts. Just a few hours after Neil became trapped, the rescuers encountered another unforeseen problem. By this time, the atmosphere in the shaft had become severely polluted, with Neil's body cutting off the airflow. His disorientation became evident, and his behavior grew increasingly irrational. Experienced cavers were sent down the shaft to reach Neil, but one by one, they were forced back by the toxic air. 3 volunteers lost consciousness while attempting the descent. Finally, the 4th volunteer, Ron Peters, managed to secure a rope around Neil's chest. Upon starting to pull, they realized that this only worsened his breathing difficulties. News of Neil's predicament spread rapidly through nearby villages. Seasoned cavers, known for their bravery and resourcefulness, hurried to Peak Tavern with ropes, oxygen masks, and makeshift stretchers. They were determined to navigate the perilous shaft, but the descent was grueling. The narrow passage, scarcely wider than a shoulder, twisted and turned, triggering feelings of claustrophobia. The air, tainted with Neil's exhalations, assaulted their lungs and clouded their vision. One by one, they emerged defeated, gasping for fresh air, their eyes red and stinging. The Royal Air Force airlifted oxygen cylinders and specialized equipment to the scene. When a delivery of oxygen tanks arrived at 12:30 a.m., there was hope that it would revive Neil and facilitate his rescue. Although the air quality marginally improved, it remained insufficient. It was decided to continue pumping oxygen throughout the night, with plans to send in a nimble, experienced caver capable of navigating the narrow shaft first thing in the morning. By early Monday afternoon, nearly 24 hours since Neil had entered the cave, his labored breathing could still be heard. Despite the desperate situation, the team remained determined to persevere. Compressed air cylinders were used to try to clear the foul air from the shaft. The walls, ladder, and rope were coated in mud, obscuring Neil's location. All that could be seen was a muddy blockage far below, with Neil firmly jammed in an immovable position. Meanwhile, incessant rain threatened to flood the Mucky Ducks area of Peak Tavern. As a precaution, it was advised to withdraw for everyone's safety. Once the rain eased, accompanied by an RAF doctor who had joined the rescue effort, they returned to the head of the shaft where they had last heard Neil breathing. But this time, there was no sound. Neil Moss was declared dead on Tuesday, March 24, 1959. Dr. Hugh Kidd described the experience as the first and only time he had declared death without actually seeing the patient. Throughout the ordeal, Neil's father, Eric Moss, waited at the tunnel entrance. He requested that his son's body be left in place to prevent anyone else from risking their lives. Contrary to popular belief, the lower part of the shaft was sealed with loose rocks collected from the chamber floor, not with concrete as often reported. The once well-decorated chamber that housed the tiny shaft eventually became Neil Moss's final resting place. Today, the stalagmite chamber is named Moss Chamber in memory of the courageous young caver who tragically lost his life. Ten students from University of Florida set off for a thrilling caving expedition in Ellison's Cave, Georgia. What started as an adventure quickly turned into a harrowing struggle for survival. Let's dive into the story of Grant Lockenbach and his best friend Michael as they face the icy depths and relentless dangers of one of America's deepest caves. On February 12, 2011, with winter still gripping the land with an icy chill, 10 students from the University of Florida embarked on what they believed would be an exhilarating caving expedition. The group, composed of 5 boys and 5 girls, was led by 20-year-old Grant Lockenbach, who was eagerly anticipating his upcoming birthday. Among the group was Michael, Grant's close friend and fellow adventurer. The two shared a bond forged through their academic pursuits, Christian faith, and love for thrilling activities such as rock climbing, skydiving, wake surfing, and caving. Their destination was Ellison's Cave, located in Walker County on Pigeon Mountain, Georgia. Known for its depth and challenging terrain, Ellison's Cave is the 12th deepest cave in the United States and features the Fantastic Pit, the deepest unobstructed pit in the country, nearly twice as tall as the Statue of Liberty. The students were undeterred by the cave's reputation, confident in their skills, and excited for another adventure. The group departed on February 11th, traveling over 400 miles to reach Georgia. They arrived in the afternoon and checked into a hotel near the wildlife management area where Pigeon Mountain is located. Excitement buzzed in the air as they prepared for the next day's expedition, discussing their plans and double-checking their gear. On the morning of February 12th, the students dressed in casual clothing packed their caving equipment and left their phones behind. Believing they wouldn't need them, they underestimated the severity of the cold and the potential dangers they might face. As they ascended the mountain, the temperature continued to drop, but their excitement kept them moving forward. Grant and Michael, seasoned adventurers, reassured their friends that everything would be fine. After nearly an hour of hiking, they reached one of the cave's narrow entrances. The opening was small and jagged, allowing only one person to pass through at a time. Despite its intimidating appearance, the darkness beyond beckoned to them, promising the thrill of exploration. One by one, they squeezed through the entrance, their headlamps cutting through the darkness. Inside, the cave revealed an otherworldly beauty. Stalactites and stalagmites adorned the cavern, and the walls sparkled with mineral deposits. However, the biting cold was a constant reminder of the cave's harsh conditions. In summer, the cave's temperature hovers around 56 degrees Fahrenheit, but in winter, it felt like an icy tomb. The group decided to limit their exploration to a small section of the cave to avoid the worst of the cold. Their plans were abruptly disrupted when one student's backpack slipped and fell into the warm-up pit, a vertical drop of 125 feet. Although not as deep as the Fantastic Pit, it was still a significant and dangerous descent, especially given the freezing conditions exacerbated by a nearby waterfall. The backpack contained vital supplies, and the group felt retrieving it was necessary. Grant, as the leader, volunteered to go after the backpack. His friends urged him to reconsider, sensing the potential danger, but he insisted he would be fine. Determined, he began his descent into the pit, using a rope to lower himself into the abyss. As Grant descended, the cold grew increasingly intense. His shivering became more pronounced, but he pressed on, encouraged by the voices of his friends above. The sound of the waterfall grew louder, a constant reminder of the treacherous conditions. Halfway down, he encountered the full force of the waterfall, which drenched him in icy water. The shock of the freezing water caused him to lose control, and his harness and rope malfunctioned, leaving him entangled and unable to move. Panic set in as Grant struggled to free himself. His screams for help were drowned out by the roar of the waterfall, but his friends heard his faint cries and called back, urging him to stay calm. Michael, without hesitation, strapped himself to the same rope and began his descent to rescue Grant. Michael reached Grant, who was by now nearly incapacitated by the cold. He was shivering uncontrollably, his movements slow and his words incoherent. Michael tried to free Grant, but he too became entangled and was soaked by the freezing water. Both were now trapped, unable to move up or down the rope. Above, the rest of the group was frantic. Some stayed to provide encouragement, while others hurried out of the cave to seek help. They retrieved their phones and contacted the authorities at 2:19 p.m., explaining the dire situation. In the cave, the voices of Michael and Grant grew weaker as the cold sapped their strength. Their friends above continued to shout words of encouragement, but their efforts seemed in vain. The cold was relentless, draining the boys' energy and slowing their heart rates. As the reality of the situation began to set in, the group above grappled with a mixture of hope and dread. Time seemed to stretch interminably as they waited for the rescue team, their hearts pounding, each passing minute, the rescue team arrived swiftly, treating the remaining students for hypothermia before descending into the pit. The students who had stayed behind described the exact location and conditions within the cave, emphasizing the urgency. The rescue operation was complex and fraught with challenges. The team, equipped with advanced gear and experienced in cave rescues, descended into the pit with determination. The environment inside the cave was hostile, with temperatures continuing to drop, and the waterfalls were making communication difficult. Despite these obstacles, the rescuers moved methodically, prioritizing safety while working as swiftly as possible. By 3:30 p.m., as the rescuers reached Michael and Grant, they found the two friends entangled in a grim embrace of survival. The scene was haunting. The icy water had taken its toll, and both boys were unresponsive. The rescuers checked for pulses, but found none, a confirmation of the worst fears held by those above. The extraction process was painstaking. Untangling the ropes and carefully lifting the boys without causing further entanglements required precision and strength. The rescuers worked tirelessly, their breath visible in the frigid air as the hours wore on. When they finally emerged from the pit, carrying the lifeless bodies of Michael and Grant, the scene above erupted in grief. Friends collapsed in tears, their sobs echoing off the cave walls. In the aftermath, the surviving students were treated for hypothermia and shock. Counselors and university officials arrived to provide support. But the emotional wounds were deep. The loss of Grant and Michael left a void that would be felt long after the immediate horror had faded. Their story became a powerful testament to the unpredictability of nature and the limits of human endurance. Subscribe our channel if you liked our content. With that being said, I'll see you for the next one. On the evening of November 24th, 2009, John Jones and his younger brother, Josh, set out on what they anticipated to be an exhilarating adventure at the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah County. This cave, a popular destination for both tourists and seasoned spelunkers, boasted a variety of well-known spots, such as the Big Room, the Maze, and the Big Slide. Despite the allure of these famous sections, John and Josh were drawn to the more challenging and less explored areas of the cave. Having bid farewell to John's wife, Emily, who was pregnant with their second child, and their young daughter, Lizzie, the brothers, along with 9 friends and acquaintances, made their way to the cave's entrance. Though none of them had ventured into this particular cave before, they were equipped with a map and shared stories from others who had. John, a medical student at the University of Virginia, had not been caving recently due to his busy schedule, but considered himself experienced. He and Josh had spent much of their youth exploring various caves in Utah. Nutty Putty Cave has only one entrance, measuring a mere 1.8 meters across. This meant that any passage navigated must be backtracked to exit. This structure necessitated careful planning and a good understanding of the cave's layout. Inexperienced cavers could easily become disoriented and trapped in the labyrinthine passages. Unfortunately, on this night, this very danger would manifest. The group entered the cave with high spirits. The initial areas they explored were spacious and accommodating. However, John and Josh, along with 2 friends, soon decided to seek out the more notorious parts of the cave, specifically the birth canal and the aorta crawl. These sections were infamous for their narrow and claustrophobic passages, which had trapped many cavers before. Despite these warnings, John's confidence and determination led the group onward. After navigating the Big Slide, a 45-degree descent into a larger room, the brothers and their friends split up to explore different paths. John and Josh chose a passage they believed led to the birth canal. However, John inadvertently took a wrong turn, leading them into an unfamiliar section known as Ed's Push. This passage was poorly documented and known for its complexity and dangerous narrowness. Ed's Push was a roller coaster of tight squeezes, twists, and turns. requiring cavers to maneuver their bodies in challenging ways. John, unaware of the exact path he was in, pressed forward, believing he was still on the right track. His journey led him to the Corkscrew, a perilous and notoriously tight area. 5 years earlier, a 16-year-old named Brock Clark got stuck in the same corkscrew section. At 5'7" inches and 140 pounds, he became wedged when he tried to turn around, and rescuers took 14 hours to free him. John now found himself in the exact spot where Brock had been trapped, attempting to turn around. At 6 feet tall and 200 pounds, John knew that turning around here was impossible. He was in a 12-inch high space with no room to maneuver his body. John decided to push forward to a ledge area, squeezing over the top of it. The space was tight, but he believed he could see it open up ahead. He sucked in his stomach and pulled himself forward on the rocks, moving headfirst downwards, hoping there was an area ahead where he could turn around. Unbeknownst to John, no one had ever crossed this ledge before, and he was in uncharted territory. Despite the tight and uncomfortable position, John remained calm, convinced there was an opening ahead. He thought he was still in the birth canal, a part of the cave where many cavers had felt stuck but eventually found their way through. After passing through a tight zone, he began to slide toward the bottom of the tunnel, nearly doing a handstand as he tried to hold himself up and figure out how to push backward. He couldn't turn and was now upside down, with gravity pulling his 200-pound body against his weakening arms. John yelled out to his brother Josh, telling him not to follow but to go back out. They discussed his options and decided that moving forward to find a spot to turn around was the best idea. John was collapsing onto his shoulders and head and needed to make a move to get out of the vertical position. His headlamp showed a hole in the floor ahead that might lead to a larger space, giving him a bit of hope. Exactly how John ended up in this tunnel hole remains a mystery. He might have slipped, hit his head, and become wedged in the tight space. Another possibility is that he misjudged the hole, thinking it was an opening rather than a dead-end fissure. Regardless, John found himself in a small, impossibly narrow opening at the bottom of the tunnel, only 18 inches by 10 inches. Nearly upside down at a 70 degrees angle, John tried to push himself back up, but it was exhausting. His arms were in useless positions, one folded under his chest and the other trapped by his side. He strained against the walls, quickly realizing that all his efforts couldn't move him back up the 5 feet to the shallow tunnel. While his calves and feet were still free up in the passage, his legs were now wedged in the narrowest part of the hole, only 8 inches wide. He started yelling for Josh again. Knowing that John was trying to turn around, his brother recognized that his yells were not a good sign. Josh quickly made his way to his brother. Josh found John in a dire situation, trapped nearly upside down at a 70-degree angle. John's position was not only uncomfortable but life-threatening, as being upside down for extended periods can lead to severe physical complications. Josh tried to pull John free, but his efforts were futile. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Josh made the difficult decision to leave John and seek professional help. Meanwhile, friends and family members gathered near John to offer comfort and support. Time was of the essence as John's condition worsened with each passing minute. For several hours, John remained trapped upside down, concentrating on the arduous task of breathing. The fissure compressed his chest, permitting only shallow breaths. Every attempt he made to move upward only caused him to settle deeper into the crevice. As time passed, gravity relentlessly pulled him against the rough walls of the tunnel, tightening its hold on his exhausted body. After the rescue team arrived, the first rescuer to arrive was Susie Matola, who had experience with the cave's tricky passages. She tied a rope around her ankle as a precaution and navigated her way to John. Despite her best efforts, the rope experienced too much friction due to the passage's complexity, making it impossible to pull John out. Susie realized that a more advanced pulley system would be necessary. As more rescuers arrived, a team of 20 worked tirelessly to devise a plan. They faced numerous challenges, including the cave's distance from the entrance. the narrow corkscrew passage, and the hard limestone that made installing hooks for the pulley system difficult. Additionally, John's position in the cave made it nearly impossible to use conventional rescue techniques. Throughout the night, rescuers communicated with John to keep his spirits up. John, a devout Christian, found solace in prayer during this harrowing ordeal. However, his physical condition continued to deteriorate. The human body is not designed to be upside down for long periods, and John's organs began to suffer from the unnatural position. As the pulley system was finally prepared, rescuers made one last attempt to free John. 8 people worked together to pull him out, but John's legs, which had become completely numb and blue from lack of circulation, hit the ceiling of the passage. The pain was excruciating, and John's condition worsened rapidly. In a final effort, rescuers considered breaking John's legs to facilitate the pull, but medical experts warned that this could lead to shock and cardiac arrest. Despite their best efforts, John remained trapped. At 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, after 27 hours upside down, John was pronounced dead. His body had succumbed to the physical stresses of his position. The tragic death of John Jones led to significant changes regarding the Nutty Putty cave. Officials sealed Ed's push entrance and later closed the entire cave system with concrete, ensuring no one else would suffer the same fate. A plaque was placed to commemorate John's memory, marking the spot where his adventurous spirit and love for caving met a tragic end. This incident serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of caving and the importance of thorough preparation and caution. John Jones's story is a testament to the bravery and determination of both the cavers who explore these underground worlds and the rescuers who risk their lives to save them. The Nutty Putty Cave, once a site of exploration and adventure, now stands as a somber monument to John Jones and the ultimate sacrifice he made in pursuit of his passion. On Wednesday, August 17th, 5 friends decided to meet up for dinner. Their laughter and chatter filled the air, but soon the conversation took an intriguing turn. During their meal, the conversation veered towards a local secret, a mysterious cave on the side of Y Mountain, right next to the BYU campus. During their conversation, one of the girls, Jennifer Gilbreth, told her last experience in the cave. Her past experience had been harrowing. She became hypothermic and passed out inside the cave, but her adventurous spirit had not been dampened. This cave, known to some adventurous students as Gollum's Cave, was a point of fascination and intrigue. Just a year prior, 2 young cavers had fully surveyed it, but it remained a formidable challenge, known only to those brave enough to explore its hidden depths. Jennifer Gilbreth convinced her friends to schedule a trip into the cave, emphasizing that they will surely not be able to make it through the 15-feet tunnel to the other side of the cave. From the outside, Gollum's Cave didn't seem inviting. The entrance was partially submerged in a foot of water and required explorers to crouch through a narrow, nearly 100-foot tunnel. For most hikers, this would be an immediate deterrent, but for those in the know, the challenge of discovering what lay beyond was too alluring to resist. The real adventure began with a daunting task, navigating an 18 by 24-inch water-filled hole in the ground. Even seasoned explorers hesitated at this point, knowing that what awaited on the other side was a mix of excitement and danger. Determined to prove their courage, the friends decided to explore the cave that night. By the time they arrived at the cave, it was already 2 a.m. The darkness and early morning chill made the cave seem even more eerie. They sat outside for a while, gathering their courage before venturing into the shallow entrance. After a 15-minute-long debate of who should go first, Jennifer, having previously navigated the cave, took the lead. Her past experience had been harrowing. She became hypothermic and passed out inside the cave, but her adventurous spirit had not been dampened. Her confidence reassured the others. Blake, Scott, and Ariel decided to join her, while Joseph opted to wait outside the main cave, perhaps sensing the inherent risk involved in the exploration. With only a single flashlight between them, the 4 friends carefully approached the small opening in the cave floor. It was now 4:30 a.m., and the darkness outside was absolute. Jennifer took the plunge first, slipping into the cold, narrow passage. Her friends watched anxiously as she disappeared beneath the water, leaving only a small ripple behind. The tunnel was tight, no larger than a doorway, measuring just 2 feet wide and 4 feet high. One by one, Blake, Scott, and Ariel nervously followed Jennifer's lead, each taking a deep breath before submerging inside the cave. Her rope tied to a rock in the main chamber guided the way through the tunnel, secured to a piece of wood in the inner cave. This rope, though seemingly trivial, was a vital lifeline. The rope helped the cavers to navigate through the difficult path, and if you would miss the rope, the probability of you navigating the hole would be negligible. Previous explorers also had warned how easy it was to miss the exit. Brian Lamprey, a seasoned caver, once recounted a harrowing moment when he overshot the exit and found himself trapped in a dead end. The seconds he spent finding his way out were a chilling brush with death. Thankfully, he was able to make his way out of the hole just before he gasped with lungs full of water. Despite these risks, Jennifer, Blake, Scott, and Ariel made the short swim to the inner cave, a small space just 15 feet away. The inner cave was slightly more spacious, about 6.5 feet tall with a peak of 9 feet, providing a small air pocket above the water. Inside the cave, the explorers were likely feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The initial relief of surfacing inside the inner chamber would have quickly given way to discomfort. The air inside was likely bad air, the term used in caving to describe air that lacks the normal oxygen levels. In a cave with stagnant air and a closed water source, carbon dioxide buildup was inevitable, a situation exacerbated by the burning of candles inside the cave. With no airflow, carbon dioxide settled at the water level, creating a hazardous environment. The explorers, unaware of the poor air quality, would have found their ability to think, move, and breathe gradually impaired. The hole was suspicious enough to only accommodate one person at a time. Therefore, realizing the urge to act rapidly, Jennifer attempted to exit first. While navigating her way out, she faced a dire situation as she struggled to find the exit hole. The low oxygen levels, around 10 to 12%, severely reduced her ability to hold her breath. With only about a minute before she would lose consciousness, panic set in. The murky water, stirred up by sediment, made it even harder to see, and she may have lost grip of the guiding rope. Her chances of finding the way out quickly became slim, turning an already desperate situation into a tragic one. Back in the inner cave, the others waited in the dark, not knowing Jennifer was fighting for her life. After a brief wait, Ariel was next to attempt the exit. The elevated carbon dioxide levels would have doubled her respiration rate. Taking deep breaths before diving, she swam forward, only to encounter Jennifer's body in the tunnel. The reality of feeling her friend's lifeless body in the confined space heightened the panic. The supposed clear passage now felt claustrophobic, with no room for two to navigate the tight opening. The narrow tunnel, once a path of adventure, turned into a nightmarish trap as she realized just how little space there was to maneuver through. Blake and Scott, having spent even more time in the bad air, would have faced similar difficulties. Blake plunged into the water-filled tunnel, only to be confronted by the lifeless bodies of Ariel and Jennifer. The chaos intensified as he struggled to understand what was happening. In the dim light, the narrow tunnel felt even more suffocating. Ariel was unconscious and on the brink of death, leaving Blake in a state of sheer panic and desperation. Scott, the last to attempt the exit, would have suffered the longest exposure to the bad air. In his weakened state, he might have quickly lost consciousness upon encountering the others. Meanwhile, Joseph waited outside, unsure how long his friends would stay. With no clear plan in place, his anxiety grew as minutes turned into hours. By 5:30 a.m., still no sign of his friends. Joseph ventured into the cave and peered into the watery hole, seeing no movement or light. Confused and worried, he called some friends familiar with the cave. When they couldn't help, he finally contacted the police at 6:25 a.m. Joseph could only wait anxiously as authorities arrived. Rescuers immediately began pumping air into the cave to restore oxygen levels and pumped out water to create an airspace within the tunnel. After an hour of pumping, they discovered Jennifer's body floating inside the tunnel. Continuing their efforts, they found Ariel, Blake, and Scott together, all facing the exit hole. The evidence from the scene, Joseph's account, and the autopsies confirming drowning as the cause of death pointed to a tragic sequence of events. The poor air quality and cramped tunnel had claimed the lives of 4 young, healthy individuals. To prevent future tragedies, the cave entrance was sealed with concrete, ensuring that no other explorers would face the same fate. September 9th, 1990, Mark Healey checked into a YMCA hostel in Melbourne. He told his family he was heading out for a skiing trip to clear his mind. But in truth, Healey had a different plan. The plan that would end in tragedy. Healey had 2 loves in life, the thrill of adventure and the joy of teaching. Every chance he got, he was out exploring. Australia was his favorite destination, and he had embarked on countless expeditions across Tasmania and Western Australia. Whether he was skiing down snowy slopes, navigating through caves, or hiking along rugged trails, Healey lived for the excitement of the great outdoors. Over the years, he honed his skills and became quite the expert, always seeking the next adrenaline rush and the beauty of uncharted territories. But just as much as he loved his adventures, Healey was passionate about teaching. He often said that educating young minds was his true calling. His dedication to his students was evident in everything he did. He believed in the power of education and inspiring the next generation. So when the school where he taught announced a special excursion to encourage students to embrace adventure, Healey was over the moon. The cherry on top was when he was selected to lead the trip. It was the perfect blend of his 2 great loves, adventure and teaching. He couldn't have been more excited, not knowing the dark twist this journey would take. The students were told this trip wasn't for those with weak hearts. The itinerary included rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and cave exploration. Despite the stern warning, many students eagerly signed up. They were drawn to the thrill and the promise of a memorable experience. One of the places they planned to explore was the Mystery Creek Cave, nestled within Southwest National Park. Although ideal for beginner cavers, it was not without its risks. There were hidden dangers, and a lack of caution could turn a thrilling adventure into a deadly one. Nonetheless, with his extensive experience, Healey felt confident in his ability to lead the students safely through the cave. On the morning of July 2nd, 1990, 19 students eagerly gathered for the expedition. They were buzzing with excitement, chatting about the adventure that awaited them. 8 of them were particularly excited about the cave exploration. They had heard stories about the cave's beauty and were eager to see it for themselves. Knowing the potential risks, Healey enlisted the help of another teacher, Joanne, and a seasoned colleague, Danielle. He wanted to ensure that the students were well supervised and safe at all times. By noon, the group was on their way, ready for an adventure despite the gloomy, rainy weather. They were well prepared with sturdy boots, helmets, and wetsuits, ensuring they could handle the challenges ahead. As they approached the entrance to Mystery Creek Cave, they met a man who had just excited. He was drenched and looked weary. He warned them that the cave was flooded up to his boots due to the heavy rain and suggested they come back another day. He shared his concern about the rising water levels and the potential danger, but Healey, confident in his expertise, decided to proceed. He believed he could guide the students through the cave safely. He had faced challenging conditions before and trusted his skills and judgment. Inside, the cave was even more breathtaking than they had imagined. The walls were adorned with glowworms, casting a magical luminous ambiance. However, they soon encountered rising water levels to cross safely. Healey demonstrated a clever technique he had learned from his many expeditions. They would form a human chain with the strongest students at each end and Healey in the middle. Where the water was deepest, those not in the chain would hold onto it as they crossed. This method worked perfectly, and the students found it both effective and enjoyable, eager to use it again. By 4:30 p.m., they reached a narrow section known as the Matchbox Squeeze. This part of the cave was notoriously tight, requiring them to wriggle through to continue on their path. It was a challenge, but they were up for it. On the other side, they moved towards the cave entrance via the laundry chute. As they progressed, Healey noticed the sound of water was getting louder, indicating rising pressure. The noise of the flowing water echoed through the cave, creating an ominous soundtrack to their journey. He decided they needed to use the human chain technique again to cross safely. The students enthusiastically formed the chain, but this time, the water was up to Healey's knees, and the current was stronger. They began crossing, but the first student, a petite girl, almost fell due to the current. Healey caught her just in time, and she made it across safely. His heart raced with concern, but he kept calm to avoid alarming the students. He knew that if he showed fear, it would only increase their anxiety. The next student started crossing, encouraged by Healey and the others. They cheered her on, providing words of encouragement and support. Just as she was about to reach the other side, the current pulled her down. She screamed for help, and Healey knew he had to act quickly. Her friend and one of the teachers, Joanne, rushed to save her, but the current pulled them too. The situation was becoming increasingly dire. Healey realized he needed to get the remaining students to safety first. He couldn't afford to lose any more time. He let them out of the cave quickly, urging them to stay close and move swiftly. The rain had made the ground slippery, and they had to be careful with each step. Once the students were safe, he returned to search for the missing 3. Hours passed with no sign of them. Authorities arrived, finding Healey devastated. The 3 victims were later found, but it was too late. The cave had claimed their lives. Despite the tragedy, Healey was hailed as a hero. People praised his efforts, acknowledging the bravery and dedication he had shown. He had done everything in his power to ensure the safety of the students. But Healey couldn't shake the guilt. He felt responsible, believing he could have done more to prevent the loss. The weight of the tragedy pressed heavily on him, haunting his every thought. 2 months later, unable to cope with the pain, Healey packed some gear and told his family he was going skiing. They wished him well. Unaware of the turmoil he was facing, he checked into the Abbey hostel in Melbourne. In a moment of despair, he climbed to the 10th floor and ended his life. The loss of Healey was a devastating blow to those who knew him. He had been a source of inspiration and strength, and his absence left a void that could never be filled. This urge of adventure reminds us about a similar incident that took place in history. Ignoring all caution, one man, driven by a thirst for discovery, ventured into an uncharted passage that turned their fun camping trip into a chilling nightmare. You should check it out. Subscribe our channel if you liked our content. With that being said, I'll see you for the next one.